A busy night in the land of Joe and Joe as we have a major storm that's going to be impacting a very large portion of this country in one form or another. It's not all about snow either. It's also about heavy rains, strong winds, and maybe even some serious coastal flooding in parts of south-facing shorelines in the Northeast. We're going to talk all about all of this and 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 get into it in a big way. All that and more on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County. We'll be discussing tonight, among other things, the possibility that there could be a bit of a flash freeze come Friday, late Friday afternoon and evening, right during the heart of the commute. So rock salt will come in handy. They are Long Island's largest rock salt source, and they service everybody in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area and beyond. They've got all the great snow and ice melt products. If you need a snowblower or two for what comes later in the season, or any other supplies to make sure your home is or business is functioning during a winter storm, head over to Omni 631-756-1125 for the best prices anywhere. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So
you cannot forget that .com.
No, you can't. Oh,
Right.
absolutely not. So let me bring myself up here. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. Joe Rayo sits on the right, and I'm Joe Cioffi. I'm on the left. And yes, I always forget that I got to turn the opposite direction. And welcome to everybody on the chat board. Welcome to all the new subscribers, to those of you who are lurking in the background, to those of you who are watching us from foreign nations around the world. We're glad to have you. Hit the subscribe button on my YouTube channel with your Gmail account, and you can get notifications on the Joe and Joe Weather Show every time we're on, which is Monday through Thursday at 7:35, Sundays at 11. Fridays and Saturdays we take off, but sometimes we're there in case there's a storm. And in fact, this week we probably will be on Friday and not on Sunday, because Sunday's Christmas Day. So anyhow, Mr. Rayo, one of the things that I'm seeing here with regards to certain things, it's not always about the magnitude. For example, with this big big storm, when you look at it and you look at what's going to fall in terms of snow amounts, yes, around the Great Lakes they're going to get a lot of snow, especially in the lake effect areas. But in other areas where they've got winter storm watches up, it isn't so much that they're going to get a lot of snow. It's really going to be more about maybe putting 4, 5, or 6 inches of snow on the ground and then throwing a 40 to 50 mile an hour wind on top of it, creating blizzard conditions. So don't be fooled, not you, Joe, but I'm just saying in terms of how people consume the information, don't be fooled by the idea if you see a place that says, oh, they're only going to get 4 inches or they're only going to get 5 inches. It's going to be there's going to be blizzard conditions, and it's going to be tough at the very least.
Well, I've timed out this cold frontal passage through the tri-state area, and I think it's looking pretty much like 2 to 4 or 3 to 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Friday afternoon, the Friday before Christmas weekend. And this is the last thing, I think, in the tri-state area that you want to see, because it looks like, Joe, we're going to be seeing heavy-duty rainfall here from Thursday night on through at least early Friday, in fact, much of Friday. And then all of a sudden, here comes this front ramming through with winds that are going to shift sharply from southerly, balmy southerly direction into the northwest. And we could have potentially damaging winds with this frontal passage, because it's going to be moving through very quickly. And also, as you mentioned or alluded to, possibly even a flash freeze, because we're looking for temperatures just before the cold front moves through to get up as high as maybe the upper 50s to near 60. And by the time we get to early Friday night, those temperatures will have tumbled down through the 40s, through the 30s, into the 20s. And you talk about all of that rain that will fall here. And if the temperatures fall fast enough, we could be seeing some secondary roadways ice up. Sometimes those winds help out in the overall scheme of things. If you get a strong wind like what we may very well see later Friday night, that may actually help to dry the roads out before the temperatures fall fast enough to freeze things. But that wind, yeah, everybody's, so many people talk about snow, blizzard, snow, but it's not really. I think in this case, with this sharp front, the one thing that's going to be possibly most damaging will be those winds. The winds are going to be very strong, a hard shift from south to northwest, a drop in the temperature, temperatures falling below freezing rather quickly here within a few hours after peaking somewhere in the 50s. So we've got a pretty wild day coming up on Friday. For the folks who are experiencing out in the nation's midsection right now, this problem with the wind, with the falling temperatures, and with the snow, it has already been rather rough and will continue to be rough over the next few days.
Yeah, the thing with the flash freeze is you're right. If the wind sometimes can help to dry things off, there's going to be a very short window between the time the rain ends and the time the temperature falls below 32. And I don't think it helps the cause either that it's going to be later in the afternoon and evening. And the other thing I was thinking of is that it would be better all the way around if we don't see a change over to snow, because if we do, it probably means that it rains right up until the time temperature gets down to the mid 30s, and then it goes below freezing. In other words, the ground is wet and stays wet as the temperatures fall, so there is no time for it to even dry remotely. If that happens, and I think in some places it may, I think if you're in northern New Jersey, I think, Joe, it's possible that it could happen up by you. Maybe it happens down on the coast too. It's hard to say. I don't think we're going to really know probably until Friday morning how that's going to play out. But if it winds up in those areas where you go from rain to snow, it won't matter. You could get a coating. You could get a coating if wet road, if those wet surfaces freeze. You put a little coating of snow on it. It's going to be a skating rink in a lot of places.
Right, and they can't really put, they being the local municipalities, that they want to brine or treat the roadways in advance. They really can't, because all of that will just get washed away by the rain. And you're right. Then we have to deal with the big drop in the temperature, and that means that if we do get, as you just mentioned, a quick turnover from rain over to snow, or maybe rain to freeze the roadways, the wet roadways, into ice. I mean, that. As I've said so often, sometimes the worst scenarios, the worst situations on the roads are not the ones where 6 and 8 inches are dropped of snow. Sometimes the worst scenarios is when you have that very light coating on a roadway that hasn't been properly treated, and then you end up with big trouble. And that's what we may be looking at for later in the day on Friday. Of course, Joe, could you ask for a more?
It's the worst day it could happen. It's the worst day.
Situation.
It's a huge travel day. People are going to be trying to fly out of airports in a screaming south wind, or land in airports. Let's not forget there are people coming to this area from other places. On top of that, you've got this blizzard that's going to be impacting Chicago and Milwaukee. Chicago's a major hub. You're going to that's going to create delays, down the road at other airports as they wait for planes to arrive and they have to change and all the rest of it. It is not going to be a fun day on Friday. And the other thing I want to point out, really important for those of you who are if you're watching, south-facing shorelines, particularly the South Shore of Long Island, Nassau County, Western Suffolk County, and also in New Jersey, I would say Northern Ocean, and Monmouth County, the high tide on Friday pretty much comes at the peak after you've experienced most of the south winds before the wind shift, and that's going to be a problem. A lot of the coastal flooding tools, Joe, are forecast. And remember, Friday's also a new moon. It's not the peak high tide, but the peak high tides are over the weekend. I looked, but it's up there, and some of the coastal flooding tools. Hat tip to Bill Goodman because I put the link up on the chat board for anybody who wants to look at it. Are forecasting moderate to even major coastal flooding in some Long Island South Shore communities. So bear that in mind for those of you who live right along the coast. If you're in Lindenhurst, Babylon, Freeport, those towns, pay close attention to high tide because the coastal flooding will probably be worse than what it was with the nor'easter we had last week.
Well, yeah, you mentioned the fact that we have a new moon. It's also a moon that is approaching perigee, the closest point in the Earth's orbit. So not only do we have the alignment causing astronomically higher than normal tides, the so-called syzygy of the sun, Earth, and moon lined up, but the moon itself is going to be about as close as it can come, 221,900 or 800 miles away from the Earth. So the high tides are going to be higher than normal because of that unusual closeness of the moon relative to the Earth. And so you've got that to aggravate the situation even more so. Now, again, the new moon is going to, usually we have the highest tides 1 or 2 days after the new moon, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, okay, well, then we're not going to really have that much. Yeah, you're going to still have a problem because the moon is getting closer to the Earth, and that will only loan itself, along with a gusty and strong southerly wind through a good part of the day on Friday. So folks who live, as you mentioned, Joe, in places like Freeport, Lindenhurst, right along that south coastline of Long Island, or along the south coast of Connecticut, or right along the immediate shoreline of New Jersey, you're going to be seeing, again, the potential for not only coastal flooding, but also perhaps moderate beach erosion. It's one of those situations coming up, and it will be one that will need to be monitored very carefully as we move again through the end of the week into the upcoming weekend.
No question. And the south wind starts Thursday night, so there's a high tide during Thursday night. That water's not going out, and then you're going to have a second high tide. It's the second high tide during later Friday morning that is going to be the big problem because at that point it would have been blowing with a south wind with gusts of 50 miles an hour or more for a good solid 12 hours. So there's going to be a lot of piling of water. I got the tool on the screen. As I said, I put it up on the chat board for those of you who want to take a look at it, or if it's relevant to you, you can bookmark it, of course. But you just kind of hover your mouse over these green boxes that are flashing, and you can go to you can tighten get a tighter view. Great South Bay at Lindenhurst, the USGS station there, forecasting major flooding for Friday. The Hudson Bay at Freeport, forecasting major flooding. Moderate flooding for some of these other stations in East Rockaway, for example, Floyd Bennett Field, New York Harbor near Bay Ridge, forecasting just normal tides there. Moderate flooding at Great Kills in Staten Island. Moderate flooding for Perth Amboy, Arthur Kill at Staten Island, and on the Jersey Shore, some of them include Shrewsbury River at Seabright, moderate flooding there. Manasquan, moderate flooding. Matalocan, a major flood being forecast there. Further south, Barnegat Bay at the Barnegat Light, moderate flood there. And minor flooding as you go to Ship Bottom in New Jersey. Minor flooding as you go further south. So it's kind of confined to northern Ocean County, and then on up through Monmouth County. And then again, the South Shore of Long Island, particularly Nassau and western Suffolk. If you go out to the east, for example, Montauk is only forecasting minor. Moderate flooding in New Haven, moderate flooding in Bridgeport. I don't have any Westchester stations, Joe, but I imagine it's probably moderate there too.
Oh, yeah, it's no question about that. And yeah, this is one of those situations again where especially at the time of high tide. You're going to see that piling effect of the water, and eventually that could lead to, again, moderate to, in some cases, even major coastal flooding because, again, of the phase of the moon, the fact that the moon is abnormally close, and all this is going to just lead to a real nasty situation right along the shore areas. And let's not forget also, with anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 inches of rain coming, beginning late tomorrow night, and on into Friday, there's going to be a lot of urban flooding on some of the roadways and some of the highways. So, Joe, what can I tell you? Friday before Christmas weekend, and this looks like one of those scenarios where, not only people trying to get out, let's say you head to the airport or need to go somewhere in their cars, I think, but also keep in mind, I'm sure there are going to be a few parties going on, Christmas parties that have been scheduled for this Friday night. So people are going to be heading to these, little soirees to enjoy this Friday night with their family and friends or whatever. This does not look good
No.
from the standpoint of weather.
We've got a lot of watches and warnings out across the country. And some places have multiple advisories and warnings to cover the cold as well as the winter storm. So you might want to check with your local National Weather Service office because I can't punch every single spot in all those states you see there that are under the wind chill advisories, but I've noticed on a few of them that I did punch up that there are corresponding winter storm warnings up in a few places. So what we can see in terms of what the Weather Service is highlighting is most important. We have winter storm warnings now up for southeastern Nebraska, much of Iowa except the Northwest. We have our first blizzard warnings up in western Minnesota. Winter storm warnings going to the east, advisories as you head further north. Winter storm watches in eastern Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, western Michigan, eastern Wisconsin, the upper peninsula of Michigan, western Wisconsin also under winter storm warnings, winter storm watches in northwest Ohio. We also have winter storm watches up for northwest Virginia and westernmost Maryland and eastern West Virginia. That makes it so hard to get it straight. And I believe they also just put up some winter storm watches up in southwestern New York from Buffalo on south and west. I just want to check to see. This is from, so this is from Friday morning through Monday morning. So we have a winter storm watch up again now on this Tuesday for something that's going to go on from Friday through Monday. So there's going to be another round of crazy lake effect snows in some places in southwestern New York. And we'll be monitoring that, of course. They already have high wind watches up for parts of northeastern New York and into northern Vermont and a small portion of New Hampshire. There'll be additional. I guarantee you there are going to be additional wind advisories and high wind watches and high wind warnings that are going to be going up in the Northeast and down into the northern mid-Atlantic states in the coming days. Across the South, cold is going to be a big deal. By the way, Joe, I had my first snowflakes today.
Oh, congratulations.
I had snowflakes and snow pellets.
So you had what, grapple?
No, it wasn't grapple. It was the snow pellets.
Okay.
The one that looks like those ice cream, the dots. Okay.
Right.
Wind chill watches up all across the South. Some places in the South have not had a hard freeze yet, and that's where you see all the blue here. So they have a hard freeze watch. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a hard freeze watch versus the freeze watch. Meanwhile, out in the west, we've got winter storm warnings in northwestern Colorado, southwestern Wyoming, a couple of counties in northeastern Utah, some high wind warnings in southeastern Wyoming, winter storm warnings in northwestern Montana, northern Idaho, and a slew of, what are these, winter weather advisories? Because I can't make out the color. I got to check. Yes, those are winter weather advisories that flank around those winter storm warnings. Also in parts of northwestern Oregon and south central Oregon, and still have winter storm warnings up in the Cascade. So very, very busy watches and warnings map, Joe. It's going to get busier. There's going to be more warnings going up. I think we're going to see more blizzard warnings. And as I said with snow amounts, here's some of the snow amounts being forecast in the Midwest where they've got the blizzard warnings. Minneapolis, they're forecasting 8 inches. Okay, so it's not like you're getting, we're talking about 20 inches here, but you've got a lot of spots there. Looks like, let's give it a general range of anywhere between 6 and 9 inches in the areas that they have the blizzard warnings up. But again, it's the fact that you've got that, which is a fair amount of snow, of course, and the big winds, because those winds are going to be gusting to 50 miles an hour or more there as well. And as the lake effect, Joe, kicks in around the Great Lakes, some really big numbers showing up in western Michigan around Grand Rapids, and then south down into northern Indiana. Seeing foot to a foot and a half, and then as you go north on the upper peninsula of Michigan, you're seeing amounts over 2 feet there.
It's crazy. It really is. And let's not forget, of course, as we mentioned a few moments ago, that the folks in the eastern Great Lakes with a west to southwesterly wind will also be getting into that lake effect category once the front moves on through. That front's going to move on through the Northeast like one of these 40-ton Mack trucks. It's going to move real fast. As I said, I think in the tri-state area, it's coming through right around 3 or 4 o'clock, just as the Friday afternoon commute gets underway. And that's going to be a pretty wild. I mean, between all of the rain that has fallen in the previous hours and then that rapid shift of the wind from south into the northwest with gusts of 30, 40, 50 miles an hour, this really is going to be, well, I'm happy I don't have to, number one, commute in this type of situation, as I have so many other times during my storied career as a TV weathercaster. But it's going to be nice to be able to sit, pull the chair up, look out the window, and just watch as things change rapidly over a span of just an hour or two, beginning, let's say, around 2 or 3 o'clock Friday afternoon, with the winds, with the drop in the temperature, the cold, the rain, the snow. Again, a pretty wild setup coming our way.
Now, I've widened the snowfall forecast map so you can see the areas that are supposed to get snow out of this. And of course, the lead moisture coming up on Thursday is going to is what they have that winter storm watch up for. Northwestern Virginia, northeastern West Virginia, and western Maryland, and I looked at their forecast there. It's probably going to be elevation driven. They're going for 3 to 6 inches combination of snow and ice. Generally, across the Northeast on the backside, it's a few inches. It really isn't much. This, by the way, this takes us to through Friday evening, so there might be a little bit more in New England on the backside, but most of that, it's going to be rain all the way up. But a fairly large portion of the country is going to get snow out of this and wind up with a white Christmas with snow on the ground. And notice down in Kentucky, a couple of inches there. This will be as the cold front goes by on the backside of the cold front. And I'm sitting on the inside the southern edge of that light blue of a coating to an inch in northeast Georgia. And I was looking at some of the models, Joe. It is about a 3 to 6 hour window where I could get a burst of snow before the temperatures fall completely. As the temperatures fall completely off the wall. So I got my fingers crossed. I got my freezer filled with food. My fridge is filled with food. I'm hosting Christmas this year, so I got everything I need. I don't have to go buy anything. So let her rip.
Well, why don't you have your celebration up at the summit of Brasstown Bald?
Oh, okay. So if with the 5-degree normal temperature differential from where I am to Brasstown Bald, which is almost 5,000 feet up, so they're forecasting a low, I think Friday night they're going for a low of 5 or 3, I forget. And Saturday night, they're also going for a low of about 5. So Brasstown's got a shot maybe of going below 0. And there's going to be wind here, so that's going to be another issue. So
That
the answer to your question is no. I'm not going to go on top of Brasstown Wall to have my Christmas celebration.
And meanwhile, the grandkids are saying, "Come on, Grandpa! Come on, Pop! Let's go! Let's go!"
No, they're not going to want to be out in that cold.
Yeah.
Let's see. Just take a look out in the west. Still some snow being forecast for Seattle, which is remarkable to me. We've got big amounts in the Cascades there, 20 to 40 inches. Big amounts also in northern Idaho, probably on the order of a couple of feet there in some places. And you see the amounts come down a little bit, but some places, some isolated amounts where you're going to wind up with a foot. Most other places winding up with a couple of inches. So we'll go to the satellite. Got the lightning flashes going here, and we've seen some thunderstorms just move through the Florida Keys with some lightning strikes and off the southeast Florida coast. And then there's some more out in the Gulf side that seem to be weakening a bit as they move eastward. I got a little bit of, as I said, I had a couple of snowflakes and some snow pellets out of this, and that most of that's going out to the south, but it is going to be setting up some of that tropical moisture there is going to get involved with the energy that is now moving through the Pacific Northwest. You can see the bright white clouds up in Montana that are making a move, and there's more energy behind it. So there's a lot here that's going to make the big dive southeastward and set this whole storm up. But right now, at least in the northeast down through the mid-Atlantic states, it's partly to mostly clear. It's also clear back through Ohio, Indiana, down into Missouri, Arkansas, and in parts of northeast Texas.
Now let me ask a question. With this front that's coming in on Friday, what do you think the possibility might be? Because we're going to be in like a warm wedge of air for a short time with the front to the west of the cold front to the west of us. I assume the warm front will have moved to our north earlier in the day. What do you think the possibility is for maybe a little convection in our area, either late Thursday night or on Friday?
I can't see why not. This is a pretty powerful system. You've got good lift. I didn't look at to see what kind of vertical motions and lifted indices we have, but yeah, why not? Let's see what SPC did. I don't know. I have not looked at SPC at all through any of this to see what they're doing. Okay, so for Thursday, I'll bring it up on the screen. All right. So yes, let's put in the chance that there could be a rumble or two of thunder. SPC agrees with you. They have a general thunderstorm risk reaching up into southern Connecticut to just north of you in Route 84 to northwest New Jersey, and from there southward. Risk for thunderstorms and a marginal risk for severe weather in southeastern Virginia and northeastern North Carolina. So, yes, there could be a rumble or two of thunder.
Yeah, I had figured just as much. I mean, it's such a dynamic, robust situation with this warm front north and this cold front coming in from the west, and we're going to be in that warm sector for a while. 50s to maybe touching 60 degrees. That even up where I am, and that's not. I mean, that's not really pushing all that much. I mean, there's going to be so much warm air surging up ahead of that cold front, but then just as quickly. Once the front moves on through, bang, we're going to see the temperatures take a quick drop downward. And people who are, asking about the possibility of snow, then, we might see a little bit of snow, on the backside of this thing, but certainly not enough to deliver enough to, if the official designation of a white Christmas is at least an inch of snow on the ground, I doubt very much we're going to see that by the time we get to Sunday morning. And now, since the warm air gets booted out so quickly, and it dries out presumably so quickly, I'm not even sure anymore, Joe, about even the possibility of a locally heavy snow shower, or even an isolated squall with the passage of that front on Friday afternoon. It looks like it's just going to go ramming on through, turn the winds around into the northwest, drop the temperature, and set the stage for blustery or brisk and cold weather from Friday night through Saturday and maybe even on into Sunday as well.
Before I start on the radar, Can you, so we don't lose them, if we got any super chat hits? I thought I saw one. Uh, let let's thank the person before the notification disappears, and then we can't thank them. Can you
Oh,
see any?
yes, yes. We had a super chat hit from early in the show from William Huber. We also had one from Jacob Mack Mind Fullness, and he's down in Florida, Joe, and he's talking about the fact that it's going to get so cold down his way that he's concerned about falling iguanas.
Well, the freezing line goes at least down to Orlando from what I looked yesterday. I didn't check today.
And we also have a super chat hit from Robinson Mant 95. Robinson Mant 95. These are new people.
Yes.
I've not seen that. So thank you very much to Robinson Mant for 95 for hitting super chat tonight. And so far, that's it.
Okay. And do we have 100 likes yet?
We have 120 likes.
Okay, never mind. We'll shoot for 200 tonight.
And 443 watching right now, at least on my screen.
All right, great. Let's give them some more weather. We've see there's rain across southern Georgia, central and southern Georgia, on the Florida Panhandle, also down in South Florida. Looks like there's one special marine warning that popped up and then it disappears. Rain extending into South Carolina and southernmost North Carolina. To just northeast of Wilmington, kind of shuts off there, maybe around Morehead City. And then we've just got a couple of streaks of snow showers going on across Lake Superior, going into the Canada side. And you can see the action of the snow up in Idaho, northwestern Montana, also down into Utah, Colorado, and on the west coast, the precip that's coming in through Washington and Oregon. And let's look at what WPC is doing with respect to rainfall here over the next 7 days, because after this, it'll be quiet through Tuesday of next week. So we're looking at some an inch and a half to maybe, Joe, as much as 2.5 or even some 3-inch areas being indicated in northern New Jersey, over the Catskills, western Connecticut, western Massachusetts, and southern Vermont. Also, there's a streak there that they've got drawn in eastern Connecticut that runs up northward through east central Massachusetts and into New Hampshire and Maine. And there's a lot of liquid here. And of course, around the lakes, you're seeing, again, with the lake effect of liquids, precipitation equivalents of 1.5 inches or more, which is going to be all snow for those areas in western Michigan from north to south, and on the upper peninsula of Michigan as well. The precip amounts back through Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, down through Illinois. Probably under 1/2 inch. In fact, the dark green there is 1/4 inch. So let's say 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. And you're talking about snow that's going to be coming down in bitter cold air. So the ratios are probably going to be up around 18 to 1. So it'll be a very, very fluffy powder, which will be very easy for gusty winds of 40 to 50 miles an hour to blow around. And in the northwest, a ton of moisture there. That's many inches of rain. Looks like 5 or more in some places from northern California all the way up the coast. And, of course, it's going to be mostly snow inland. Speaking of snow, WPC, this is the probability of at least 2, which takes us to Friday evening. And obviously, it is 100% probability in and around the lakes. 80% probability extending down into northern Missouri, northeastern Kansas, Miss Fowlerite, southeastern Nebraska, southern Illinois, southern Indiana. The 50% line heads into Kentucky, including Lexington and Louisville. The 5% line, the 1 to 5% line touches my house. Okay, and you see how it runs. Now, I'm kind of curious. I'm going to go to the 24. I'm going to go to the probability. I'm going to try to get the probability of at least an inch, which means I got to go to the 24-hour map. I just want to see the period from Friday afternoon to Friday evening to see if, they're giving any kind of probability for an inch. So this is through 1 o'clock Friday afternoon. And let me fix the opacity there so it stands out. Okie dokie. So there you go. So basically, you have to go into central and western PA to get into the probabilities of 50%. This is up. This is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So now I'll go to 7 o'clock in the evening. They do have the 1 to 5%, Joe, right on the coast. Okay, but they do have probabilities of 20 to 30% in northwest New Jersey, the Hudson Valley north of 84. And then, of course, the numbers start to really go up as you get up toward Albany and beyond. And they also increase in Pennsylvania in south central PA, looking at probabilities of 50% or higher, 50 to 80% probability of at least an inch. So for those areas in south central PA, for example, this is where it could be really problematic, where you rain and then you change to snow. So and your temperatures fall very, very quickly. So this is where you certainly could wind up with not much snow, maybe a coating to an inch or so, but you wind up with everything eventually just getting frozen solid.
That's Amish country, by the way,
Yes.
southeastern Pennsylvania. So, yeah. So and that all of that mayhem probably will be happening a few hours before it reaches us. So this is something that will be happening for that part of Pennsylvania, probably more like 12 to 2 or 1 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, lunchtime, if you will. And again, for them being inland, they stand a better chance of at least seeing the rain go over to snow and stay snow for several hours and possibly accumulating to, not a tremendous amount, but maybe an inch or two. And, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, I've driven on that road in that part of Pennsylvania. Not the best. So,
no. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning. Don't be fooled by the fact that you're hearing a forecast that says only a coating to an inch or so. That doesn't tell the whole story, because with those falling temperatures, the roadways, maybe it doesn't happen near the coast. Maybe it doesn't happen. If you look at this on this map, there's a 5 to 20% probability for Philadelphia, for example. For Washington, D.C., Baltimore, New York City is just north and west of New York City. There's a 5 to 20% chance, from according to the Weather Prediction Center. But if you're gonna, it's gonna be dicey traveling in this. And certainly, if you're flying out to the Midwest, I hope you've already checked with your airline and did a little changing. This is in the long range. There's not a whole lot really that's going on. I had the long range map and now it just went away on me. Okay, there it is. So this takes us into Saturday morning. So you can see the 10% probability line for at least 2.5 to 3 inches of snow gets down right to New York City, western Connecticut, southeastern Pennsylvania, northern Maryland. 30 to 50%. You got to go on the Pennsylvania side into that darker green, and of course the higher probabilities of 50 to 70 and 70 to 90 are right along the lakes. Those light blue areas east of Lake Ontario and also in southwestern New York, northwest PA, northeast Ohio. Western Michigan, the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, lake effect big time that is going to be happening over there. So it's all getting started here. I'll get the upper air, and I was thinking about the fact that the snow weenies, of course, are. They're standing on the edge of the cliff at this moment here in the East Coastal region, Joe. I had somebody say that it will never snow along the I-95 corridor ever again.
And I saw somebody today on my Facebook page said it never snows anymore in New Jersey, and I wrote back to this person and said, I'd like you to tell that to anyone who lives in Atlantic City, who last year picked up about 35 inches of, it never snows anymore around here.
Right.
So
here's your block. This was back on Saturday. There's your blocking high. Your main jet stream suppressed way to the south. Upper lows running around all over the place. Big big high here building up into Alaska, so that opened up the cold air spigots in a big way, and we're going to see that play out after this storm goes by. And as we moved into the weeks, and now we're at Tuesday, we're kind of here in the east in a ridge position, but up in the northwest, you'll see this upper low swinging around, dropping southeastward. The block is still here. It's right up here, but unfortunately for snow lovers, the upper low that was, I'll just roll it back so you can see it, this upper low, as I've been saying the last couple of days, was supposed to stay up there or go east or slide east into southeastern Canada. Instead, it's going underneath the block itself. It's actually lifting up and around. The energy from the new system is so dominant that it just basically absorbs it. And you've got this digging upper low. And again, always remember, folks, it's where are the troughs and where are the ridges. If you're going to have a trough axis down around 90 degrees west or a little bit west of that's no good for snow in the east, particularly in the coastal eastern part of the United States, because that just floods the entire east coast with warmer air all the way up into New England, which is what's happening. The upper feature here is strengthening. It's going on it's doing that negative tilt there, tilted north, west, southeast as it lifts up. So it's a powerhouse. I mean, make no mistake, it's a powerhouse. And that's going to also bring down all the cold air that was built up in Canada in the last week to 10 days. And it's coming down in one big shot. And it gets all the way down to Florida. All that blue down there is telling you how far south the cold air is actually going to get. Pretty far south.
And Carl Semko, another new name on our chat board, reminding all of us who are football fans. He writes, "Okay, Jobu." Now, Jobu, in case you're not a fan of Major League, that's the movie that about the well, they're no longer the Cleveland Indians, but those of you baseball fans know about Jobu. He says, "Okay, Jobu, I do it myself." That's the guy who does the Allstate commercials. I forget what the actor's name is, but he's one of the players on the Cleveland team, and he has this little mannequin or this little statue in his in his locker where he dedicates, chicken and whatever. He calls it Jobu. Okay, Jobu, I do it myself. A steady rain, possibly heavy at times, for the Jets game at MetLife Stadium on Thursday night. You talk about a messy scenario for a football game, and all of a sudden, Billy DeWolf, the late, great Billy DeWolf, who did Professor Hinkle on Frosty the Snowman, comes to mind. Thursday night, that field should be, with that heavy rain, messy. And indeed, we may be looking at on Thursday night, Joe, with that punch of milder air coming up along the East Coast on a southerly wind into MetLife Stadium. Could be looking at flooding rains during that football game. And that's a crucial game for the Jets. They need to win that game to stay in the playoff hunt. That's not exactly the kind of weather you would want for an important game, but a half to 1 inch of rain on Thursday night. So yes, Jobu, I'll do it myself. That's what he says when they need a home run and he's coming up to the plate with his bat. I don't know what you would do for that football wise, but that means a really messy situation for the Jets on Thursday night for that. Why are they playing on Thursday? Well, I guess it was their turn. All the teams at one time or another play Thursday night, and they're going to be playing Thursday night in what has to be the worst possible situation, save for maybe frigid temperatures like at Lambeau Field on Thursday night.
Oh, can you imagine?
Well,
another ice bowl.
I mean, the thing is, what would you prefer to play in? Would you prefer to play in heavy rain, heavy showery rains on Thursday night? Or if they had that game on Friday night, they would be playing with roaring winds, falling temperatures, wind chills probably in the teens and single digits. I don't know what's the worst situation, but either way, good luck to the Jets on Thursday night. And Joe, we've gotten so many super chat hits. I'm going to just roll down the list here. Mark G, Helen Bertona, William Huber, Robert on Mante 95, Jacob MacMind Fullness, Trevor Barlow, that's a new name, Doug Crum, another new person joining the chat
No,
board.
Doug's been around. Doug's from down here. Doug's been around. Thanks,
I
Doug.
have not. I'm sorry. I did. Doug, thank you. Joe Lepresti and Huckle Schnook.
Huckle Schnook.
Huckle Schnook.
Well, that's better than what. Well, because he's been around. Who's around again? What was it? Pee Face?
No comment.
No, I know. Okay, I've got the European up. This is courtesy of Pivotal Weather, and we can take a look at how the European handles this storm. And I know Jess Harden is praying for some snow in Alabama, and you get clipped by a little bit of it, Jess, and so do I. That clipping will also come into North Georgia, the northern part of the state anyway. But you can see what happens here as the surface low just drops southeast down all the way down into New Mexico and Texas, and you've got this frontal boundary that runs from western Michigan, south of St. Louis, down into East Texas, and then it just kind of ropes around back up into the Rockies. And going forward, the low on Thursday evening is 1,000 millibar low in central Indiana. And then, of course, that's when it starts to do its major deepening process, intensification process. In 6 hours, the pressure drops to 990 millibars. Then it's down to a 980 millibars near Detroit. It's actually a little bit further to the east on recent runs, which is probably going to make a difference for places like Detroit, which are sort of sitting on the edge of this. So you probably want to pay a little closer attention. But I mean, look how tight the gradient is. It's crazy. Look at those isobars down in Ohio and western PA, and then down the Appalachians to me. I mean, this is in northeast Georgia. I mean, the gradient is nuts. It's just nuts. And by the way, you could see the rain, the system off the Florida coast. One low moves out, but an inverted trough forms right along the Carolina coast here, and you start to see precip break out during the day during tomorrow night into early Thursday morning. And you can also see the area of darker blue snow where they've got the winter storm warnings up in northwestern Virginia and Johnny Quest land, and in northeastern West Virginia and western Maryland. It jumped. Let me get back. So that's going to move up the coast. You see a large area of moderate to heavy rain. The European actually bullseyes the heavy rain right over New Jersey, northern New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, Connecticut, and Long Island. This is at 1 a.m. on Friday. Then I think we're going to get a little bit of a break, because then we're going to have to wait for the cold front from the storm swinging around with some showers. And again, is there going to be some snow on the backside? Well, the European says from northwestern New Jersey northward, yes, a narrow band on the west side of there. So those areas up there are going to wind up being in flash freeze land, I think. And it may still wind up extending a little bit further south. I honestly think we're not going to know that till Friday morning in terms of how the short-range models handle this. And then, of course, it's all about the cold, dropping all the way down to the south and down into Florida as the low eventually rotates its way up into Canada by Christmas Day. At least the weekend, it's still going to be windy on Saturday, at least. It's not going to be as crazy, but it's still going to be windy on Saturday, Christmas Eve, and still on the breezy side even on Sunday in the Northeast and down into the Mid-Atlantic states, but at least it will be dry.
Hey, what would happen if on Friday the rain suddenly stopped in the morning and the clouds thinned and we actually had some sunshine breaking through the clouds?
Well, you know what?
Before the cold front arrives.
It's not impossible.
No, it's not. We've seen crazier things happen, but that would be pretty wild. We talk about, what is the possibility for convection? I want to tell you, if the sun would have come out on Friday before the cold front arrives, that would set the stage for some rather interesting weather for later in the day. We've been talking about maybe snow squalls and rain changing to snow. How about just one big gigantic rumble of thunder, or or significant cell of convection that forms out ahead of the front. That would be very interesting. Brendan Doherty asks you, Joe,
Yeah.
if the storm is moving further north, would the impact of the winds at the surface be less than the upper air?
Let me take a look. It's a good question. So let's take a look here. I'm just going to go off the GFS, which, that kind of it's not that different from the European. It's actually the low is down in northwest Ohio. Brandon, the gradient looks awfully tight either way. I mean, I don't think it really changes anything in terms of Thursday into Friday. There's a little gap there Friday with the warm front. Most of the wind actually Thursday night is probably going to be, because you're in Delaware. The gradient is actually tighter from southern New Jersey northeast into New England, and much less tight further south. Your gradient doesn't tighten up until the front goes by. And then it really starts to scream more from first from the southwest and then from the northwest. So I guess the answer to your question is yes and no. And there's the GFS. With the GFS has got this dark blue snow. I mean, that's heavy. That's a very, very narrow stick of heavy snow on the backside. Just kind of clips eastern Pennsylvania and maybe northwest New Jersey, because it lifts up northeastward with the low where it is. That's one of the things that may happen here, Joe. With the low where it is, it's going to get to a point where it's only going to get so far east and then go more north, and
Right.
and that's what I think the models are saying here.
Krishnapedia says 506 watching, yet only 178 likes. Y'all better hit that button or you'll get coal in your stocking. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, we're at 180 likes right now.
Yeah.
And
gonna be a cold. My thickness, by the way, gets down to 510. That's cold. That's Friday morning. I have the lowest thickness here Friday morning, and you can see the GFS has got two periods of coming in at 1 a.m. Friday and 7 a.m. Friday. Still, by this time it's probably almost over. So sometime overnight Thursday night, about a 3 to 6 hour period where I could get a little bit of snow out of this. If I want to, because Joe, if I get snow, even if it's a coating to an inch, it's going to be so cold here, it's not going to go away. It'll be here for Sunday. For when the kids come. Now, longer range is just one thing I do want to point out. I know you love Alberta Clippers, so here's one. There is a diver that's coming down early next week. There's a low that dives down into North Dakota and goes southeast. And the GFS just pretty much minors it out, falls apart, and just has some sort of suppressed low way offshore, and it goes out. But I did notice, I don't know if you saw the European today, and we'll take a look at the upper air on the European. So the GFS, if you look at the upper features, after this big storm pulls up in Canada, it still sits up there. So you got this upper low that dives down into the Dakotas, and then there's something there that's off this is on Monday, on Monday, Boxing Day. That upper low dives down almost straight south to New Orleans and just and into the northeastern Gulf. I mean, they almost never do that. But at the same time, you got the big storm upper low in Canada starting to pull up to the north. So you're getting some ridging building in the eastern part of the United States. So at least from the world of the GFS, it's not going to be conducive for any kind of development. However, the European offered a very interesting view of this before we warm up, because it is going to warm up.
Right.
So here's the upper system pulling out, and it's slower, Joe. The upper system on the European kind of hangs around there near James Bay for a much longer period of time. And the diver actually, instead of diving all the way down the way the GFS has, the European, I think, has something that's looks a little more realistic, where that short wave, and I'm talking about this system here, comes down from Missouri into Texas, and then you got something in the north that tries to phase with it a little bit ultimately what the European did with this at the surface was that it tried to develop something, but it just has it offshore. And you see it there. It just goes out to the east. But meanwhile, the Canadian, I'm not going to say anything bad about the Canadian model because I know we've got folks from Canada watching tonight. And I don't want to get on their bad side. The Canadian today, so here's the first storm with the Canadian, which is fairly similar in the broad sense with the other models. And then it's got this diver that comes down, and it's got a low there on the Florida Panhandle, and it tries to lift it up the East Coast. You see it. This is for Wednesday or Tuesday night, Wednesday, where it passes just south and east. The old Canadian run from last night actually had precip, frozen precip in the northern mid-Atlantic up to southern New England next Wednesday, and then it goes out, and then after that, the whole pattern kind of just goes, and it warms up for, I guess going into New Year and maybe even a little bit beyond that. So I think there's enough going on in the upper air and the differences in the models and the way the GFS has behaved lately, especially with this storm, that you might want to. We'll probably take. I'm going to keep my eye on this. On this, maybe something for the middle of next week before it warms up.
Oh, sure. I would agree that it's worth looking at. I mean, this takes me back in a way. I used to, remember when, 30, 40 years ago with the old NGM or LFM, we'd see something like this and we'd hang our hat on it and say, let's keep an eye on this. This might be something. 9 out of 10 times we always had our hearts broken, but you never know. We'll see what happens for the middle of next week. Michael McGuire says that Mount Mitchell has forecasted minus 35 wind chill for Saturday morning per GSP. I think he meant GFS. Or what is is there a GSP? No, I think he was referring to GFS. But minus 35 wind chill, and I've been hearing that those kind of wind chills being
unless GS is the Weather Service office in Western North Carolina. Is that Greensboro?
Greensboro
might be Greensboro.
Yeah, it might. But I've been hearing 35 and 40-degree wind chills being bandied about for the northern plain states. But then again, Mount Mitchell in North Carolina, that's in western North Carolina. That's like 5,000 or 6,000 feet high. So yeah, I would believe a 35 below wind chill for Saturday morning at that particular altitude. And by the way, Brendan Doherty and also Frank
Karajat. No, Karajat, I think. I hope I got it right, Frank. I know I've seen you on the board before. Karajat.
Hitting super chat tonight.
Thank you.
So,
and did you get Julio Dieguez from earlier tonight?
Did I get it, Julio?
Well, if you didn't, Julio, thank you so much also for hitting super chat. It was back. Actually, that was only about 3 minutes ago. Julio Dieguez. Thank you very much. So I just want to repeat at least what I said at the beginning of the show with respect to coastal flooding. If you're on south-facing shoreline, southern New England, western and central Long Island, South Shore of southern Nassau, southwestern Suffolk County, and then Monmouth County in New Jersey and northern Ocean County, moderate to, in a few places, major coastal flooding at the high tide on Friday morning. So just please bear that in mind, and I'll probably talk more about that. We'll talk more about that tomorrow and on Thursday. That's one thing, Joe. We've been talking about this storm since last Thursday, and since the models really kind of lined up on Saturday that this was going to, do what it was going to do, which was head over to the lakes. It just seems like that's all we've been talking about. So I just kind of want it to come and go, and let's get it over with. But we still got tomorrow to get through, tomorrow and Thursday. To set all this up, and maybe there still might be a surprise or two along the way in one form or another. Commander Bradford says, I saw NOAA saying a 3 to 4 week long range saying cooler than normal in the east again. How accurate are those longer range model predictions? Well, I honestly don't. I could make a joke, but I'm not going to. I don't follow their 3 to 4 week long range. I rarely look at it, but I will say this. Let me bring up the Les Vortex des Polar. We'll go all the way up to the 10 millibar level and look at the polar vortex way up in the atmosphere. And the one thing I noticed, well, two things, and maybe this explains what's happening in some fashion. The polar vortex, I'm just going to roll this back. Well, we like to look at the stratosphere because that sometimes, a lot of times, that gives us hints about when blocking is going to occur, when the polar vortex is weak or is split. And of course, at this level of the atmosphere, you're up where planes fly, and we're actually even above where planes fly. And the features here, they're just two. And sometimes in the winter, it's just one. You see the polar vortex, and even in the summer, it's just one big upper high up there. The polar vortex in the coming days actually coils up into a tight little ball over Greenland, and you see it here. It really pulls up. This is when whenever the polar vortex gets wrapped up like this, all the cold air gets pulled up into Canada and up in the Arctic regions and back over Siberia. It doesn't bleed down to the south. In El Nino winters, some El Nino winters, and we actually had this happen in a La Nina winter. When it gets like this is when winter weather is a dead issue across the United States, while it's in this coiled, really wrapped up like a tight little ball. But it doesn't stay that way for very long. Joe, it actually starts to stretch a bit north-south, and if you look at the flow here at that level of the atmosphere, it's coming down from across the Arctic into Canada and into the Northeast. Actually, the stratosphere gets fairly cold in the Northeast and down into across the Great Lakes and even down into the Ohio Valley. You see how that light blue kind of gets further south. That doesn't do it very often. So this might be hinting that if this is correct, this might be hinting that this warm up that's going to happen may not last too long. Okay, I know all the crybabies out there are thinking that I had somebody say that it's just going to be basically record warmth for January and February. And March. He had it all figured out. Okay, fine. Why don't you just go to sleep for 3 months and don't even bother to look at the weather if you're going to take that attitude? It's no fun that way, for God's sake. So I'm kind of optimistic here for the winter weather lovers that we get this brief break, and then the polar vortex will be doing its thing and setting up the atmosphere in a colder fashion. The other thing I did notice, by the way, is that when we look at the teleconnections, the PNA, the Pacific North America Index, which when it's positive, it usually means ridges in the west and troughs in the east. Well, guess what? It's going positive right about now and staying positive for the rest of the month and into early January. The North Atlantic Oscillation, the NAO, higher pressures in the North Atlantic blocking or potential blocking. Well, guess what? That actually is neutral right now. And it's going to go negative again as we go through the end of the month. So we've got two of the three. The issue is
we're not seeing maps.
Well, you got to tell me.
I'm just relaying what others are saying right now.
All right. Well, I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to do 100 things here. Right. So I forgot. Okay. So here's the polar vortex, what I was talking about, folks. I'm sorry about that. So here it is right now. It gets wrapped up into this is Thursday and Friday. It starts to wrap itself up like a tight little ball through the middle and latter part of next week, and then it pulls up and starts to stretch again and extend down into the Northeast and into the Ohio Valley. This is way up into the atmosphere. Now, as far as the teleconnections are concerned, I already said the PNA. I'm not going to show you that, but the NAO, which is neutral right now, actually goes a bit negative as we head to the end of the month. The one thing that I was getting at that's missing is the East Pacific Oscillation. We lost the ridge in the Northeast Pacific. So that teleconnection is positive, which is not favorable for cold air. You got to get that teleconnection to go negative, and that's when you get cold air that's when you get a cold air mass like this, because we had a really off the wall EPO negative in the last week to 10 days at some point, and that set the ball rolling for all this cold air to start coming into the eastern part of the U.S.
And so it goes. It looks like it's going to be, at least in the short term, a cold Christmas, but maybe by New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, temperatures will have moderated and make for a rather balmy end of the year. We'll see a quick flip, and then, as Joe just mentioned, possibly that period of milding or moderation will be short-lived. We'll go back to colder weather very quickly thereafter as we
We'll
move into
see.
January.
I have no idea how it's going to come out. That's what makes this fun. You really don't know. You really, at the end of the day, you really don't know. And when you do know, what happens? You get thrown a curveball. And suddenly a low that's supposed to go to 40 and 70 winds up going to the Great Lakes. And that's the way weather works. And Leon Probitsky banging the super chat tip jar just now. Thank you, Leon. Here we are at 8:43 p.m. And we've got 255 likes tonight, which is absolutely fantastic. And we've already had almost 3,700 views on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. So we are very, very excited and thankful. And big thank yous to everybody. So if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel so you can watch this show, here's your chance. Just go ahead and subscribe. Make sure the notifications are turned on, and you will never miss the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which will be on again tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yes, and tomorrow we celebrate the first day of astronomical winter, which will arrive at 4:48 in the afternoon, and we're already into meteorological winter, and by the end of this week, everywhere you look, it will most definitely feel like winter. And what more could we possibly say? I think we had over 500 views or 500 people watching at one point tonight, Joe.
Works for me.
It's amazing.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah, it really is great. We want this show to just keep growing and growing. We had somebody from Australia left a comment this morning. He watched the show last night and really enjoyed it. And then he had somebody. I sent you the copy of you read the comments. The other one I sent you.
Yes. Yes, I did.
It said that we sounded that we were basically nails on a chalkboard.
I will tell you this: if that be the case, where's the chalkboard?
Yes, exactly. Oh well, I won't. I won't say what my response was. You have to go if you want. If you folks are interested, you can go read it in the comments section. I tend to get, I deep down inside, I tend to be, my humor is very dark, and I also, when I'm riled up, I tend to get just a teeny bit passive aggressive. So anyway.
Well, we're up to 271 likes. I got to ring the like bell. There you go. And
I didn't hear it.
You can't? Can you hear it at all?
Oh, okay. No, you can't. It's not coming through your headset.
Come on.
No, it's not ringing. It's a defective bell. Oh,
Does that mean we're not going to make? Does that mean we're not going to make it to 300?
We'll probably make it to 300 because people will be watching it on a replay.
Right.
All right.
Well, we're at 273 right now.
Well, time to go to bed. I'm going to go out and finish my cigar and have a glass of wine. I made my turkey brine. My red wine turkey brine is all made, and the turkey is going in it tomorrow because it's going to brine for 3 days. I gotta figure out how it's not going to freeze outside when the temperature gets down to 5, because then I'll have to defrost it again. But hopefully the salt water, the water is the brine is so salty. I imagine the water probably won't freeze. So I'm hoping. And I also have a 7 pound, almost 7 pound prime rib sitting in the fridge. That's also going to be part of the dinner on Christmas Day.
Well, if I didn't have my wonderful wife, who in her own right is a very, very, very good cook, I would be on the bus tomorrow heading south toward Georgia to be at your house by Christmas.
Yeah, anytime,
Thank you.
anytime. All right. Everybody, tomorrow, 7:35 Eastern Time. We'll be here Thursday at 7:35 and probably Friday at 7:35. But just to remind you, our Sunday show at 11 a.m. this Sunday ain't happening because it's Christmas Day. And you know what? We're all going to be spending Christmas days with our families. And then, um, unless it gets too rowdy Christmas Day that either of us need to take Boxing Day off, we will be back on Monday, the 26th. Okay?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Great night tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. Night, everybody.
Au reservoir.